All right, everybody, welcome to Baitman Live, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. Thanks for joining in this Wednesday evening. This is the third week in a row, well, third out of 4 weeks we have been live here. So I want to appreciate everybody for joining in. We have eclipsed over 20,000 subscribers, and we have a brand new first-time guest this week, and it is Mr. Brandon Dickerson. And he is a sales rep within the fishing industry, represents several different brands. We'll see if this thing is working. It says no veers, which I do not believe. But he's a sales rep within the industry, and we're going to get his thoughts and opinions on what actually is happening, what's going on. I need to fix something here. This is recording. Yeah, I fixing it. All right, here we go. Now YouTube's kicking in. All right, guys, that wasn't showing anybody here. So, anyways, if you're just joining in the green room, my buddy Brandon Dickerson, he's a sales rep in this industry, been doing it for a long time. He represents several great brands, but he always gives me the lowdown on what's going on, and we're going to talk to him tonight. And we're going to talk about all kinds of things as well. The latest in the Bassmaster, FLW, NPFL rulings, the no info rule. We'll talk about forward facing, but we're going to talk about baits. And when I say baits, we're going to talk about sales. Are they up? Are they down? Is forward facing killing sales? Is it all jig head minnows? Or are companies not being diverse to generate sales? But we're going to talk to Brandon, give you a little bit about his story, and he's going to tell you how he became a sales rep, which a lot of people think is a dream job, and I think it'd be awesome. Obviously, when there's a boom in the fishing industry, you can pad your wallet, and when it's slow, it could be tough. But we're going to go ahead and bring Brandon in. He's got some great opinions. I know those guys from Texas, they love reading his stuff on Facebook. So, Brandon, welcome in, buddy. I'm going to put you on a split screen.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to kind of giving a different insight behind the scenes on what I'm seeing in the fishing world versus what a professional sees. And I always kind of compare it to a professional because they're full-time truck drivers, part-time fishermen, and I'm a full-time truck driver, part-time salesman.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you got your start as a sales rep in the fishing industry. Were you fishing in college, or always a fisherman and just having to luck into it, or was it something you went to school and actively pursued?
It's I'll try to tell it in a couple of minutes. It's a somewhat in-depth story, but it's something that I'm pretty proud of. I guess it all started probably when I was 16, 17 years old. And I was working at Bass Pro Shops in Grapevine, Texas, which was a dream job of mine at the time.
Yeah.
And I worked there till I was about 20, and I saw the reps come in. They'd visit with us. The Shimano reps would talk to us while we were selling reels, and all the bait reps would come in and talk to us. And I was sitting there running around going, that's like, I knew right then that's what I wanted to do. And then I graduated high school, went to college, went to North Texas and Denton. Started the fishing team, was the president of the fishing team. Had some national success and met some very influential people. Wade Middleton was one of the guys that actually started one of the college fishing trails. And all the fishermen were trying to figure out how to go pro. And I kind of knew that avenue was challenging. So I immediately was kind of putting my name in the hat as far as industry positions and trying to kind of just nudge people. And I went to school for a marketing degree, which essentially is glorified sales. And that's, so after I graduated, I was working at a cell phone store selling cell phones. And I actually got a connection from Wade with a guy named Gene Eisenman, who started Hydrowave out of Frisco.
Right.
And I went and worked for them for a couple of years as the sales manager, and I was driving around doing Sealy events and setting up a tent and setting up demos and selling stuff. And it was kind of my intro. And from there, I was able to graduate to a sales position that I moved to South Texas, and it was actually selling some Shimano stuff. And I did that for only a short time, only about a year, and I ended up kind of getting pulled away from a guy that owns Sunbelt Sales, who I work for now. And just so people have an idea of what we do, we kind of cross channel. So we rep 6 Cents, we rep Falcon rods, and a quite a few other lines as well. And we cross into a lot of just different avenues. Bass fishing is what I love, but bass fishing equates to almost 0% of my personal business. I sell to the Gulf Coast, so almost all of my business is saltwater.
Wow.
A lot of the guys that I work with, they sell to more of your traditional bass fishing accounts, but that's also kind of why I think my knowledge is very valid into some things we're going to talk about, because inshore saltwater redfish fishing, a lot of these guys are not technical. They're wading around in knee deep water, and that business is pretty soft too. So it's not strictly a bass fishing jig head minnow problem, I guess is what I'm getting at. This industry is challenged right now, and but I'm kind of rambling right now. You haven't asked any additional questions, but
No,
I'm
it's
just
okay.
I think that we saw essentially a 5-year bell curve with COVID.
Right.
So
That was going to be my first question. It seems like everybody in the tackle industry during COVID was going crazy. So many people were putting out new baits, and they're selling like hotcakes, and we're hitting record sales numbers, and mom and pop are ordering like crazy, and tackle warehouse ordering like crazy. And then all of a sudden, everybody fell flat on their face. I know a couple companies had said, "Hey, the pro staff, y'all really got to push. You really got to push. Your numbers are down. Your numbers are down." And then I talked to a friend of mine that's works for a different company. He's like, "Yeah, well, the numbers are down because everybody's down post COVID. So if you're doing 50% of what you did last year, you're at the median of where you were before." But some people overestimated the COVID influx and thought it would just stay like that.
Well,
So
the one thing that's not talked about enough is we rented a lot of anglers. We rented
yeah,
them. We had a bunch of guys that got into the sport for 18 months because they weren't working, or they were working from home. They had a bunch of extra time. They're going to go fishing. And that's not unique to fishing. Whether you're talking about insert outdoor sport here, shooting, golf. If you look at a lot of like the overall outdoor industry has seen sporting goods, if you will, has seen a pretty similar, I would say, bell curve. And what I'm getting at with that is obviously 2019 is the bottom of the curve. We ramped up into 2022, and then 23 was down. 2024 is down from 23. And we're probably, if all of these companies comped 2024 sales to 2019, business really probably is not that bad. But what happened is nobody really treated it as a temporary, no one treated that business as temporary. I've always kind of called it fake. It wasn't fake because people really made money. People really got commission checks, but it wasn't sustainable. And a lot of the vendors, the manufacturers, ordered so much product that once that pipeline kind of stopped with the supply chain and the customers were no longer buying, they were forced to sell closeouts. So then you have an industry, basically, you have somebody, say the standard margin on it's 40%, and use whatever brand you want to talk about. They have excess inventory, so they're selling it at a 40% minus 20. So then if you go down to a Roy's Bait and Tackle, which is a customer in my territory, and you offer them deals at a 40 minus 20, and I'm selling them a bunch of rods because there's excess inventory. And then another rep comes in 2 days later trying to sell stuff at standard wholesale. He's like, hey man, I had a guy in here 2 days ago. I gave, he had stuff at 20% off standard margins. That's where I put all my money because I'm going to make. That's what the really good retailers do, is where they can get extra margins, they're buying into it. If they can get 2% here, 5% here, extra 20 here, that's what made it so hard to sell traditional inline product when there was a mass excess. There was an excess inventory problem in this industry for almost 2 years. It's finally kind of clearing out.
Right. What was also weird during that was inventory not coming in because a lot of it was overseas cargo containers. I know specifically, 6 Cents had a problem getting stuff in, and other companies, and they're like, man, it's held up in these cargo containers, all this stuff. So then you had a demand that people are really, really waiting on these baits, and it's held up. And so once it hits whatever website, it's gone instantly. And then, people are pre-ordering like crazy. So there's then more orders. And then all of a sudden, that luster, those baits or rods or reels have kind of worn off, and then it's just kind of sitting there. That's how I looked at some of this stuff. You had all kinds of logistical supply chain issues as well during that period. But
and nobody could forecast it right. I mean, forecasting is also always impossible, and trying to forecast during that 18 months was impossible. And then, so stuff took 6 months to get it. So you're basing it off of demand in March, and you finally get it in October. And a lot of those retailers or individual customers that wanted it in March, like, I wanted it in March, not in October. And then that's why then the vendors have to eat it, and then they're trying to sell it at a closeout price.
Yep. And then you wind up with guys that's got it, your mom and pops or whoever, they've sat on it 6-7 months, and it's in the discount bin or at 30% off. They're just trying to get their money back. And a lot of times right now, I'm not trying to call Guggen baits out, but everywhere's got them on discount. Is it because they're junk baits? I don't believe that. I mean, they catch fish. I just believe that everybody sat on a giant amount of their inventory and kind of rode its course, or they're just trying to get their stock levels back to normal and sustainable. So they're closing that out. I'm not saying they're the only bait and discount bins. We both know that's not true. I'm just using that as an example.
No, and that
obviously they are really super popular.
Absolutely, they're everywhere. I mean, everywhere's stocking them. So I mean, they've had a good run, and this industry follows trends, and they've moved a lot of their stuff over to the Bass Mafia side and done a really good job of, like, that's kind of more of their technical side now, where I think they're doing some really, really good stuff.
I feel like they're kind of, as they're growing up, they're trying to grow up their brand. I'm sure there'll still be Guggen in it. Most people our age are going to associate the Guggen brand with 21 years or younger. Now you got the Bass Mafia with Chris Zaldane and some other anglers now. They're my age or older, and I think they're trying to capture that market, which is a good market. That's most of your guys that own a house, own cars, own bass boats. They're more associated with that Bass Mafia deal. So you're speaking about trends, and that's why I got you on here. We've got forward-facing sonar arguments everywhere, minnow baits like crazy, but I want to know what's the real trends right now. Is it just minnow baits and jig heads, or are people still buying crankbaits? I still buy crankbaits. Maybe I'm crazy and I like to fish that way.
Well, I do think that I still believe that tournaments wag the dog. I still think that national events drive sales. Maybe not as much as they did 8 years ago, because how big the influencers have got and how dynamic they've become, as far as YouTube channels. But like, there is no doubt that tournaments drive sales and YouTubers drive sales. And you look at national events, and there are 80% of them won live scoping. And until, to me, the best tournament this year by far was the heavy hitters. And I have no doubt they sold a bunch of Swamp Lord frogs or whatever it was he was touting. But, I just don't, I don't know how technical people are getting into the minnow. That's part of the problem. Like a trendy brand is going to move their dollars to minnows. I mean, 6 cents, we know they've been on top of the mountain. I have no doubt hard bait sales are down, but they're moving that business to the minnows.
Right.
But I guess how technical are the anglers becoming? Because it's okay, I need an eighth, a quarter, a 3/16, and then it's like, do I want my minnow to have wings or a straight tail or a fork tail? Wings, no wings, fork tail, straight tail.
Salt, no
I,
salt.
I'm, for instance, very non-technical when I do the minnow thing, but I'm also not an expert at it. But I remember how technical I was. I'm very technical with jigs and a lot of my other fishing. I'm just not as intrigued with it. But I don't think is any bait company that's been upward trending is still trending because even with live scope techniques, I guess is what I'm saying. They've just their money's just moved to the other side of the ledger. Instead of it being hard baits over here to the left, now it's a new category for them because nobody was selling jig heads and minnows 3 years ago, 2 years ago.
No. The only jig's
Now,
head you're selling for Battletail swim bait.
there's a couple of points that one point that I have not heard mentioned a whole lot on all the live scope talk that I think has merit is how many fewer baits people lose.
I was fixing to bring that up. When you rig a jig head minnow up and you super glue that sucker on there, unless you break off, you're not going to lose that thing. I mean, you get stuck in a brush pile or maybe a stump, but once the bait's glued onto the head, you catch 20, 30 fish on the thing, no problem. I mean,
Well, my other point is you're not going to get hung up on a brush pile because you're going to throw it out there and you're going to get it 18 inches above the brush pile and float it over it. And I mean, I can tell you right now, I used to lose A-rigs like crazy fishing down a dam, because you just throw it out there and wind it back and you're like, oh, well, I was reeling too slow. Now you just look at your screen and you keep it 18, 20 inches above the bottom. Like you're not going to lose it.
Right.
So I think that
you're fine. Go ahead.
No, I just think I have not really heard that point brought up much that I think is legitimate. Like I do think people are fishing less, judged on natural economic factors right now. And I think that people are losing less baits and they're using less techniques. So I think all that matters, but throw all that out the window. Even if live scope was not a thing, based on the last 5 years, this selling season was going to be down.
Right.
So I think a little bit, I think live scope is kind of everybody's punching bag.
Yeah, I feel that too. I talked to a couple of local retailers here. I don't mean just on Kentucky Lake. I sit within around 200 mile radius that I'm still friends with. I get the feeling from some it's a mixed bag. It's, well, live scopes dominate and all we can sell is minnow baits. And then I also hear is, well, I still got guys coming in buying swim baits. People still want, glide baits and stuff like that, or they're expanding their criteria. I've seen people talking about JDM in the comments. I've started seeing more local shops get more specific. I'm starting to see OSP dice show up. I'm starting to see different JDM Norries and stuff you didn't see 5-6 years ago because of the internet, because of YouTube, influencers, people like me that post stuff on Instagram. Just, I like to tell stories about baits and all that. They're saying, whoa, that's I've never seen that before. Oh, that's from Japan. And they tell this tackle shop, well, let me see about that. You either kind of, it's weird. You either got to get with the program or get out. And you're just not going to walk into a shop these days and you're not going to own a shop and just carry Strike King and power bait and make a living. It just can't happen.
No, I've actually, I've had probably over the last decade, probably 5 or 6 friends. And I think that all of them want to do it for fun. I think like everybody kind of has everybody that really loves fishing kind of has in the back of their, because I do too. And I see it with my own eyes, and I know it's one of those things where it's like I know that's a bad idea, but I would really
Mm-hmm.
like to do that, and that's to own a tackle shop.
Yeah.
And I've had, like I said, I've had probably 5 or 6 buddies over the last 10 years. They start asking me a bunch of questions as far as like, what do I need? How much tackle? How many square feet? Like, do you think I can open one on $200,000? And I'm like, personally, I would not open a tackle store with less than 750,000 in inventory.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
That's my number. I mean, honestly, probably closer to $1 million, but it's, I sit there and look at it and go, well, Shimano, you get to 50 grand before you even knew it.
Oh, easily.
And so
You can
you
do
start
50 grand just bait casters and Loomis rods.
you start adding 5, 6 premium brands, you're at $300,000 on 5 or 6 brands. And but I do, we've always known for a long time that so much of fishing is marketing. I mean, look at the color chart.
Yeah.
But
You could also argue, I always said this, Strike King was more of a marketing company than they were of a tackle company. If you look at what they've always done, and that's no knock on Strike King, they were one of the best to ever do it. They had so many good TV commercials, and now the internet, it's just marketing with KVD, the protein, the TV shows, and all that. They're just a marketing wheel. And I do think what's happened is other companies have caught up. Now you got 6 Sense really good at marketing, all those viral reels and shorts and the awesome photography, stuff like that. Now all these companies have hired younger social media guys, different marketing. They're all pumping out the mass content. It's just not 1 or 2 companies doing it now.
the real problem with everything related to live scope is going to be when all these tournament guys go out there and literally feel like they can't win unless they're, I have not seen it at an amateur level yet, especially on one day. But if there gets to a point, and I think I still think it's very conducive to certain lakes. So I don't know. I will say, like, hard bait crankbait, like mid diving crankbaits, like
a DT10,
C15s, DT10s, 5XDs, that business is significantly off. Right. I think guys are going to always throw top waters, and I don't know if they just don't buy. I mean, I will say I'm a pretty big like brush pile cranker, and I haven't caught them on it this year. I mean, I don't know if they just don't bite it anymore, or if just everybody's fishing differently.
I think it's a combination of both, and I'll say locally here, Kentucky Lake's been what it's been, and it was down. And I think you've probably even seen the media. Our smallmouth population is ridiculous right now. The lake's coming back. We're getting bigger largemouth. I don't think those fish just moved offshore until about a year ago. There's about a 4-year window where everything kind of remained up shallow. And man, I put my 6XDs, my big plugs, my C20, C25. They've been up collecting dust. This year, I noticed they started biting that deep plug a little bit. Guy in the chat here, Darius, he's been catching them on a big square bill, a balsa bait almost all year long. Our population's better, so you don't have to use those finesse techniques to get a bite. But you go look at the Invitational here, MLF and Toyota, finesse techniques dominated if you wanted to catch those 21 to 24 pound bags of smallmouth. So I think you're right. It is relative to what's going on your lake. I mean, you're not going to jig head minnow very much at the Harris chain or somewhere that's just chock full of grass, but you get a Dale Hollow or a place like that.
The one thing is, 2 years ago we would have said no one could do it at Okeechobee either.
Yeah, that's true.
And then Tyler Rivette won the elite in that rim canal on a jerkbait, and that Tucker Smith almost won the Open doing it on the rim canal in the Open that Scott Martin won. So that's I mean, if you would have told me like what's one lake where live scope is irrelevant, if you would have asked me this 5 years ago, I'd been like, well, Okeechobee's a big bowl. They're not catching them there on it. And I've been proven wrong. So the longer that technology is out, and the other, I go everywhere, in my head when I start thinking about this stuff. I know we haven't gotten to this topic yet, but the elites, you did see where they banned the 62 transducer, correct?
So that's the saltwater transducer that shoots out to 500 foot, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So my question is, they're already essentially banning certain transducers. What does that mean? Nothing more additional will ever be allowed?
Well, my first question is who's casting 300 to 500 foot for one? You're not going to be very accurate out that far, but I guess as far as locating fish, yes, that would give you an advantage. But I don't know. That's
No,
a good question.
nobody would have used. So since they can only use one, nobody would have picked the 62. I can tell you that right now. It does not read good 0 to 50 foot. That everyone's using that for the 200 to 300 foot, and then basically when you see something out there, you can troll up and then use your 34.
Correct.
I'm not a no. I mean, these guys that had 4 or 5 off the front, but that the way they were doing things, I can't wrap my mind around all of that. But the other point that I had thought about, I have 2 points as it pertains to live scope.
Sure.
One is if live scope, to me, live scope and A rigs, they could go together like bacon and eggs.
Yeah. Why isn't the A rig unbanned? I think it's totally bogus.
So my whole deal is like I looked this past week for when they did ban the A rig. I was trying to find out exactly what they came out and said, but I couldn't find any really good firm quotes. And like I said, I don't remember if it was they thought it was unsporting or they thought it was, the zeros were made heroes too easily. I mean, I know that was kind of what everybody was screaming, but I just, to me, it doesn't make sense. Even if you were just like, hey, you can only have one hook in your A rig, I think guys would throw it.
Yeah, because I'll be honest, I think 75% of the time those fish hit the one in the middle.
I think 60% of the time they definitely, but people would just they would make the middle one like sit 4 inches further back. They'd use one of the ones where it's a little bit longer wire in the middle, and then the other ones would just be dummy baits. But the other thing that and people might think I'm really dumb for even saying this, but
that's okay. I say plenty dumb stuff.
I'm not even scared. The only other live computer video processing system that exists is the AquaView that I know of.
And that's legal.
In practice.
Right? In practice.
They cannot use it during competition. Just a thought. just a kind of a random bubble thought. So
I've never played with one outside the Great Lakes because I do know water clarity is very important on those things. Now, I have seen some clips of some guys using them. I want to say maybe it was like Lake Fork and somewhere else that was recent, where I wouldn't say the water clear is near what it is up north, and you could tell what was down on the bottom. Obviously, I think the technology now is better than the AquaView in the early mid 2000s, where it was almost a black and white kind of screen.
I'll be honest, I don't even know how much it would help you during competition, but my question is why? Why can't they use it? It's just it's just a random thought. I mean, I don't know. I've never really seen anybody compare the two pieces of technology, and maybe they're not comparable. Like I said, maybe I'm dumb for even bringing that up, but they're both a live computer processing system, right? It's the only live tools that I know of on a bass boat.
One could argue old school flasher is basically live scope without 3D imaging, because it's giving you a live return. It's just in that dial, and if you don't know what that dial really means,
Sure.
But there's an art to that flasher too. My dad knew what everything meant. I'd look at one right now and I could just tell you, okay, we're in 15 foot of water. I couldn't tell you if it's grass, hard bottom, or any of that.
I could just give you the depth.
Here's a couple questions. We'll take some questions from viewers too, as always. Here's a good comment from Brian Head, good friend of mine. He's a rep in the industry as well. So today's technology is minimal compared to what they actually have. And I've always heard a lot of this stuff, the sonar and mapping, other things. A lot of times the military has some of this technology 2, 3, 5 years in advance before it ever filters down to the sport fishing world. Would you agree with that?
Well, absolutely. And I'm telling you right now, if we probably truly knew what Garmin has, I don't think the general public realizes how big that brand is.
Oh, yeah. So let's just be honest. If Garmin never shows up on a Bassmaster Elite Series boat again, their brand is not going to be hurting.
Oh gosh, with the amount of watches and stuff that they manufacture, that will, I mean, some people probably just like, oh, they make bass fishing graphs, but like they are a gigantic company. I mean, they were making
Yes.
Tom. I mean, I had one of their, I don't remember what it is anymore. You know, when Tom Toms for navigations were a thing, I had all
Yep.
those Garmin ones. Like when I first started driving 20 something years ago, I always had the Garmin ones. Like they are a massive. I'd actually like to know what their annual business is. They might be doing over $1 billion.
Oh, I'd say easily. I bet they even
They're
have
probably
military
they're
contracts.
probably a several $billion brand.
Yeah, that it's funny. I see social media, and you're on there too as well. And people's like, well, all these tournament organizations, they're driven by the electronics companies and what they pay them. And I'm sure Humminbird, Lowrance, and Garmin cut Bass, NPFL, maybe, and MLF checks, but they don't have to be involved in the fishing industry to survive. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. Lowrance is huge in saltwater, like, which is not known by Lowrance. It's Simrad most of the time in saltwater. And I also think that the bass fishing guys overstate the importance of themselves in the industry. You look at what saltwater tournaments pay and what these guys spend on boats and motors and outboards and tackle. $50 ain't gonna get you a lot of saltwater tackle. I'm just being honest with you. $50, you can get a decent haul from Tackle Warehouse, but if you're serious in this,
If you're talking like Marlin boat, Vikings 54, you're not even idling out of the marina for less than $50 in fuel.
right?
I mean, I'm not even kidding. Those guys go out there and spend $1,200 a day in fuel.
All right, here. Wow. Trevor Wagner, here's how much Garmin as of September 11th, 2024, Garmin's net worth is $35.16 billion.
Thank you, Trevor, for Googling that. That's impressive.
That's a great fact checker right there. And if anybody wants to fact check me, I'm cool with that too. I know there's a lot of fact checking going on. That's not fair or unfair, but yeah, dude, it's wild. I mean, and we both love bass fishing, and sometimes I put some negative stuff or on social media, but I'm like you. Sometimes I have to be devil's advocate. You gotta think outside the box here. We're just a small blip on the outdoors radar, really. And Bass After Dark talked about, is bass fishing a sport? I don't know if it's an athletic sport. Um, I don't know what exactly you'd call it other than glorified gambling. But
it's a competition. I mean,
yeah,
I don't look at it as a sport either, but there's a lot of things that some people just consider stick and ball stuff sports. Some people,
correct.
And to me, it's comparable to some other stuff, but I don't even know why that conversation is worth getting into. I don't care what you call it. At the end of the day, 20 years ago, it was a much more realistic dream than it is today, and that's a problem. That's where I stand on it.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, there was no college fishing. I mean, it had just started up, man. I think by the time I was a junior, senior, you're just hearing about some of these schools in the Midwest. I think Purdue was the first fishing team I'd actually heard of. After I'd been in college and miserably dropped out a few times, it started becoming a thing. All of a sudden, Murray State had a fishing team. I was like, wow, that's cool. Maybe I should go back to school. Like, oh, yeah, you could be eligible. How has the high school and college fishing driven tackle sales over the last few years? Is this a big major focal point now for the companies, or does it just kind of come with it?
I can tell you, high school fishing in Texas is huge, um, massive. I mean, to the point where they had to control it and start dispersing it and making divisions smaller. They had 500 boat tournaments at Rayburn,
Jeez.
and very much driving sales, especially because all the dads are diehard fishermen, and you know, part of it is getting them into fishing, and the parents still are the drivers and the boats and the tackle and the credit card swipes, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, I mean, high school fishing, specifically in Texas, is a giant deal, and college continues to be a giant deal. Um, it's just there. I wish the whole sport. I mean, I don't know how you do it, and I just called it a sport after we debated whether or not it was. But
Brian
that's
said he
I
calls it an
digress.
outdoor sport. I could agree with that.
I
An
like it.
outdoor sport.
No, that's fine. I mean, like I said, I don't get offended if people call it a sport or not a sport. It's
No,
the
it is
first
what it
thing
is.
it's the first thing I want to do when I have time, and I don't care what you call it. Um, but I just don't know how you funnel everything. You know, you've got just events here, here, here. You got MLF events, and I do find it very interesting that, how do I want to say this? Like, so it's are we gaining new high school anglers solely because of live scope? And the reason I ask that question is because I don't know the answer, and B, MLF decided that the high schoolers of all divisions, the high schoolers can't use it, which I
That's
found
like the
very
most backwards thing.
I I found it interesting because, you know, if you want to start arguing the fact that it's not a level playing field and they can't all afford it, so none can use it, okay. But I also think that I really believe in my heart, whether people think it's good or bad, that's beyond this comment. I think there are kids out there that are 15, 16, 17 that are only getting into fishing because of live scope.
Yes, so a perfect example. I'm glad you brought that up. Kids 10, 11 years old plays on my son's football team. Great kid, knows dad, good deal. His dad's been a crappie fisherman for years. He straight up told me, he said he didn't really care about going with me until I showed him live scope and he could relate it to a video game. Again, I'm not for live. I'm not anti live scope. I just bought a boat. It's got it on it. I'm going to use it, but
Sure.
that just shows it gives them some form of entertainment. They can relate that screen to Fortnite or Call of Duty or whatever they're playing, and they're used to input from a controller on the TV screen. Now that inputs their rod and reel, and they're seeing whether they're twitching it, popping it, or dropping it down. They're seeing the fish react, and that gets them excited. And you know what? Would you rather have your kid addicted to live scope, or would you rather have them addicted to crack? That's what
Sure.
I ask people.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's nothing wrong with it. It's not unsporting. I mean, there's every argument. It's not spotlighting deer. I know that's been something that it's been kind of
oh man,
compared
I
to.
hate that argument. I mean, I hate it. I'm also not a big fan of the well. It's like using an aluminum bat argument because there's a lot of variables in baseball. I played in high school. And, you know, I had to hit against guys that could throw in the mid 80s, and your bat isn't swinging for you. Uh, if every pitch was straight down in the middle, 80-mile-an-hour fastball, maybe I'd agree with that. But the fact that these guys can spin a ball, cut from right to left, up and
Sure,
down, uh, that
but
the great hitters can hit with whatever you put in their hand.
I think it's a pretty unanimous decision, though, that everybody basically says next year on NPFL weights will be
Down.
down. So I think that what you're essentially saying is yes, like we're going to catch them better with live scope, but I don't necessarily believe I don't personally believe that makes better TV. That maybe I'm
No.
going to be. I thought some of the best TV ever was Aaron Martin's catching 4.5 pounds when he
Oh, yeah.
was losing them on the bridge pylon and flopping down in the boat. And I mean, that's some of the best tournament coverage ever, dude. And they were catching 4 to 7 pounds a day.
Yeah.
And
How many people went out and tried to find those old school rogues that Van Dam was throwing in that tournament? Yeah, he was only caught 5.5, 6 pounds to win the tournament, but all of a sudden those old rogues were going for like $20 a pop.
so I mean, I've seen the argument out there where it's like, well, why wouldn't you want us having the best equipment? Why wouldn't you want us catching the biggest bags? Why wouldn't you? And I'm sitting there going, man, I don't really care if they don't catch the biggest bags. I think that what everybody argues is when you go to the top 10 on the final day, you want to have one guy that's throwing a buzzbait or a spook, not
Yep.
10 guys in the middle of the lake throwing a minnow. And I get that. I think that everybody kind of argues that diversity is good and more entertaining, but you know, I do I think that there is a little bit in this. It's been brought up a little bit. I listen to a bunch of podcasts when I drive, and I think there's possibly, I don't want this to be an unpopular take, but I think there might be a little bit of a overstimulation of content.
Yes. All right. Good example. You've known me for quite a while. At one point, I would say 4 or 5 years ago, there wasn't too many live streaming fishing content. It was basically me and maybe 1 or 2 other people. It's a Wednesday night, and I guarantee there's 10 other people streaming fishing content. And that's fine. Like, I like the guys at Stray Cast. In fact, I'd like to figure out how I can do this not on Wednesday night because I don't want to mess up with any of them. And some guys, they watch them both at the same time. I've had guys say, yeah, I'm watching Stray Cast on my laptop. I'm watching you on the phone and all. But there's 5 million Instagram shorts on how to rig a Texas rigworm. There's so many blogs. Check out my new bass boat. How many pros did a Skeeter bass boat walkthrough this year? If you don't know what the inside of FXR 21 looks like, you've been living under a rock, you know? And this time of year, all the guys that didn't fulfill their contract obligations, they're spamming the hell out of all their sponsors. But you're right. There's so much information out there. And we talked about this before you come on. I was watching Old Bassmaster today on Kentucky Lake. It's a 1-hour show. Yes, it's after the tournament, but I love that production of it. You know, you had Zona in there breaking down the bait and the old 3D model of the bass on the ledge or come behind a stump. They talked about the bait. They broke it down. You know, Kevin's throwing a 6XD and, you know, the bill's designed this and it's diving at this angle. When it hits the log, it causes that bait to back up and turn sideways. You just don't get all that on live now. And there's almost so much live video. I get bored. Straight up, I'm going to tell you. It doesn't matter if it's forward-facing sonar, if a guy's running down grass mats and just flipping, or fishing boat docks. Not Boy Duckett, but I'm just saying fishing boat docks in general. If he's not getting bites, I'm not watching.
Well, I think that it's hard to capture somebody for that long, right? I mean, so
Correct.
Bass Live is 8 to noon with an hour break, and then from 1 to 3. And then on the final day on FS1, you have it from 8 to noon. So on a 1-hour show, you can actually sit down and watch it, and every angler on that show is maximizing their time. If you have, Stephen Browning, if he's catching one and he tells you what it is, like, people remember that. But if you had 22 hours of content over the week, I might watch 3 hours, and it might be on a secondary monitor while I'm working, and I have no clue what anybody did.
That's one thing I love to see Bass bring back. I know the live school, bring a post-tournament production back for the guys
I think they should have
Ronnie
a
Moore,
one-hour production.
Ronnie Moore, if you're listening, go ahead and put that in the works. Because I think it'd be cool because, you know, the old school TNN had the music and everything. Dude, my dad would fast forward it to the very end to see the pros pointer. That's all they cared about. I want to see the bait. I want to see what they used, how they rigged it. And most of the guys watching live, if you look in the comments, what bait's that guy throwing? Now it's been a little lopsided the last year or two, or well, it's this minnow or that minnow. But you know, I'll look at that tournament that Lee Livesey won on Lake Fork, throwing a bone spook, 3/16 swim bait. Dude, people were going crazy over that. But that was also a very exciting tournament. Topwater makes for good TV. John Cruz catches one on a Vixen this year at Lewis Smith. How many people watched that highlight of that? Work that
Okay,
Vixen, you hear that
perfect example. I don't even know what year it was, but I know who caught it, and I think I remember the lake. And that is the Stetson Blaylock topwater fish at, was it Hartwell? The slow motion comes up and you can see its eyeball, like the bass's eye moving. Mm-hmm. That was, like I said, that might have been 2019 or 20. I mean, and there's
I remember Drew Benton catching one. It's hung on the boat dock, and he was on the stream tennis. He still has that Vixen, and he had to get that back. He only had a certain amount of OG ones. And
that was Travis. Is that when he got off?
Yeah, Lake Travis.
Yep.
Yeah, but we remember those things, because of that excitement. Everybody gets that.
And those weren't even 5-pounders. I don't think either one of those fish we're referring to were 5-pounders.
No, but it's exciting.
Well, that's my point. That's the whole point I've been trying to make, is that they don't have to be 8, 9, 10-pounders and century belts for me to think that it's some of the best fish catches in production. And I mean, honestly, it does seem like topwater is the best to watch as a fan.
Well, yeah.
But I mean, if a guy's flipping 20-pound fluoro under dock and it gets hung in a brush pile and the guy has to get to his knees down there and lean off the boat and land it, those are pretty cool.
Yeah. Michael Boyd, good point. Lee with the frogfish over the dock walkway. I remember that.
That was Florida.
Yeah. So, again, I'm not anti-forward facing, but it is a different way to fish, and people aren't used to it. But I also agree with Ben Milliken too here. When people say, "Well, I don't want to look at guys' butts all day," well, you're going to look at their butts or backs regardless, unless they're turned a certain way or whatnot. Especially if they're not catching them.
I'll be honest. I think part of people's hate that they don't up and say is the fact that it's all spinning rod.
Oh yeah, 100%. I agree with it.
I don't think it's really, that guy was looking down, or I was sick of looking at his back or whatever. It's just, I get sick of open water spinning rod fishing. I'll just be upright honest. I get sick of watching guys in open water with a spinning rod.
I own 2 spinning rods, and only one of them's got a reel. Actually, one's Baitman Junior's and one's mine.
I own them, and I love to fish a spinning rod. Do I want to watch myself catch bass on a spinning rod? Not particularly, but I want to go do it. And that's part of the problem is just finding out how to make this a spectator sport. The 2000, someone needs to Google what year it was that Michael Bennett did what he did. That was the apex of bass fishing. National Guard, Walmart, Michael Bennett, period. End of story. And
he's gone. Just up.
Yeah, and I'm not even referring to the fact that he was the apex. I just mean that time. I mean, that guy won $1.2 million or something in 18 months and just said, "All right, you can't do any better than that. I'm gone."
Yeah, it's kind of wild. We got more coverage, more media than ever. But if you look at where the sport is, and I don't want to say growth, because the sport's grown, especially at the high school, college level, young fishermen. But I don't feel people get as excited as they were in that 2005 or we'll say 2010, that National Guard FLW era. And I really feel like FLW, they laid the groundwork and almost executed it perfectly where it could have been even bigger. And then it just, for whatever reason, plateaued there.
They don't get enough respect in the long term. And I was probably guilty a little bit at the time of their peak. I think everyone had a tendency to somewhat discredit FLW Tour because you could essentially buy your way in, right? If you got $100,000 and they had an open spot, it was not a qualified driven tour. And so that was always kind of, is it pro? Is it just I can go pay? Is it like, what are we calling it? And when I look back at it, I'm kind of disappointed in myself because that National Guard deal was the biggest, in my personal opinion, the biggest deal I've seen in fishing. I don't know what Lucas and Ayler and those guys were getting being on that team, but I know that that was during my period of fishing for college, and the National Guard was paying out 25 to 50 grand a tournament for first place to the school, to the two anglers that won the tournament. College tournament, 20-year-old kids were fishing for 25 to 50 grand.
It's wild.
Those same tournaments today, 15 years later, the exact same tournaments, 3,000.
Yep. They put a lot of money on the sport, and obviously National Guard sponsor because they want to recruit these guys. Hey, what are you going to do after you're fishing? Have you thought about blah, blah, blah? Join the Guard. You can still fish. You can serve your country. Good idea. I do remember at one time when Jason Quinn, you remember Jason Quinn got that big Evan Williams deal. That was huge.
Absolutely.
He was actually, I'm going to give him a shout out, the first angler to be vlogging on YouTube. You look up Jason Quinn, you'll see old tournament vlogs. He had a cameraman and followed around that whole season when he had that Evan Williams deal. That was before the Googans and all these anglers have YouTube channels. It's pretty wild. Jason was a good angler, but I remember he lost that deal, and I think maybe John Cruz picked it up. But what John had was not near significant what Jason had. And that was kind of in that same era.
I knew a guy it must have been 07. He had the Longhorn tobacco deal, so it could be figured out pretty easily. And that was a $250,000 title sponsor deal. And we're talking, almost 20 years ago. And I promise you on the elites right now, there's a ton of guys with title sponsors in the 30 to 50,000 range.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so you had a guy 15 years ago getting almost 10x what a guy is today. But the non-endemics are almost gone. Unfortunately, there's been so many big ones that have got in and vacated. So I don't know how you paint it to be an attractive place to come park your money.
So as a sales guy and seeing all these non-endemics not in the sport, how would you sell fishing to somebody if you need a sponsorship? How are you going to do that?
Well, I don't know any of the numbers, right? I mean, the first thing that you do, the way you sell everything is you go, this is how many clicks we get. This is how many eyes we have on it. This is how many views we have. But I don't think that this sport is large enough to justify what is arguably, it's arguably 5 professional leagues, right? I mean, you have the elites, the apex. That's all. If you have a pyramid, we're all putting it on the top still.
Yeah.
Period. And I think everybody, I don't know that anybody will argue that. Then you have the BPT. Like, I don't think anyone's going to argue those are professional leagues. NPFL, I mean, you can put them in whatever bucket you want, but they're fishing for $100 grand.
Yep. It's 6 figures.
And then you have the tackle warehouse circuit. And then you have the opens. So you have 5 circuits that are arguably, I mean, obviously the opens are trying to get to the elites, but those all have live coverage. And I'm like I said, I'm just going, and Milliken's made a really good point that I've listened to a few times where he basically is arguing, and I don't know that it's that the fishing days are too long. I just definitely think that the content's too much. I would have never believed that 5 years ago. If you would, I would be like, the more content, the better. I consume. The one thing I do compare this to, and it's kind of out of left field, but growing up or 10 years ago, I was a huge fan of UFC, Ultimate Fighting.
Oh, yeah, me too. Big time.
Georgia St. Pierre, Chuck Liddell, all those guys. They had one card a month. It was $70. And I was like,
Rampage Jackson, that was my dude.
Yeah, every month it was a Saturday night, had friends over, bought the cards. Dana White rolls this deal up 6 years ago, whatever, all the Fertitta brothers, and they sell it. And then the next thing you know, there's a card every week. Literally every 7 to 10 days, a card. And I'm like, at that point, I'm over consumed with it, and I watched to this day none of it.
Well, I don't know
So
anybody now. Only time I watch it if it was a guy that I just happen to remember, or maybe it's a guy that's just got enough PR and promotion that like Israel Adesanya.
oh yeah,
I watch his fight. I recognize the name. I'll watch that, or Conor McGregor. Dude, if he announced he's fighting next week,
of
everyone's going to
course.
watch because they know. But and I'm not saying a little bit of it is I don't understand. There's so many guys from out of the country that I feel it's oversaturated, and I just don't watch it anymore.
Well,
Not
and
that
it
I
was
don't enjoy it. I loved MMA, dude. You're right. Once a month, me and about 5 friends got together. We all put $20 bill. We bought the pay per view, and now, I can't afford that.
and it was somewhat comparable because you had Pride fighting and you had Fedor over there, and it's like, is
Yep.
Fedor really better than Randy Couture? We don't know. They don't fight. Is Jacob Wheeler better than Chris Johnston? We don't know. They don't fish against each other. So it's kind of what I would really like to see. And the old school Toyota Bass Classic did it years ago, where it was
Yep.
invite these guys, invite these guys. Well, why don't we have a top 30 in points? Like, I think that could arguably be presented as the biggest tournament in fishing. You took the top 30 in points from BPT, top 30 in points from the elites, and kind of did a real big, whatever you want to call it, Pro Bowl of fishing. I don't know how you make it work. I don't know how you sell sponsorships. I'm not in the media game at all. I just know the trajectory right now on the professional side makes me very happy. That's not where I'm spending my money. It's very difficult, very sustainable, very difficult to be sustainable. How do you keep your sponsors happy? Even if you have a camera on your boat, how do you maximize that? Because I
Now
can't tell you how
everybody's got a
many
YouTube channel.
I can't tell you how many anglers have been on live fishing TV that have probably an awesome fish catch, and you're talking to somebody that follows it pretty dedicated to it, and I probably didn't see it. And so I don't know how you maximize all that, but that's just not my expertise. But it's a very interesting conversation, and I am adamant about the fact there are too many leagues and too much content.
I can't argue that. I think you make an excellent point, especially when you do the UFC comparison. That's probably the best I've heard of in a long time.
There was too much content. There literally got to the point where it was no longer a monthly, like something. And honestly, that's even the back-to-backs get hard to follow with the elites when they have one this week, one next week, 4 days. It just.
So the problem too I have with the live coverage is, so I work during the day, or I did. I'm on straight nights now, so now I'm going to sleep in the day. You get all this live coverage, they pump you up for it, and a lot of people work during the day, and it's hard to watch live. So you might get on break and you watch 5 minutes of live, and if it's not a smash fest, you may not see a guy catch jet, and you just turn it right off. I'm guilty of it. If I turn it on and it's two boring anglers doing whatever, I don't care if they're scoping or flipping or casting a worm. If they're not getting a bite, I just turn it off. I'll watch the weigh-in. Bob, I got a good friend here, Brian Crawford. He says, congrats on the boat. Thanks, Brian. Professional bass fishing is on the way out. Young kids don't watch tournaments. They watch YouTube.
Well, I think that's a good comment, and it's kind of been proven because, to your point earlier, 6 years ago, how many pros had a YouTube channel versus today? I'd say 10%, and then now 90%.
Maybe Brian Latimer
and Polinick.
Yeah,
there might have been 2 or 3 that 6 years ago had one. I think Wheeler was pretty early onto the stage.
Yeah,
Polinick was early on the stage. Latimer for sure, and that's it. I mean, and then everybody else slowly but surely had moved their way that direction, right? So
I straight up asked Van Dam at a Strike King Riders Conference. This was in 2016. It was in Paris. And I like KVD. He's always been cool with me. Matter of fact, I'm going to drive close to his house this weekend. But I said, when are you going to start your YouTube channel? And I said, that's the next big thing. He said, I'm not doing that. I'm not going. You won't see me having a YouTube channel and pouring myself out and all this. Year later, guess what? There's a KVD YouTube channel.
Well,
So
now he's got the KVD experience. He's got the TV
yeah,
show.
yeah. So
He's in my opinion, he is still the best two-pronged angler ever. And what I mean by that is the fishing side and the spokesman side.
yes,
He is one of the most impressive speakers I've ever seen. As far as like marketing a bait, selling a bait. Oh, yeah, Scott Martin would be a good one. He's been
that's
around
a
a long
good
time on
point,
the YouTube
Blaze.
channel.
You know what actually made, I think what makes Scott's transition to YouTube very easy. He had a big following for the Scott Martin Challenge, which was on Outdoor Channel and I don't know, maybe I can't remember all the networks he was on, but he already had that following. So when he basically moved it all, he was already starting on YouTube, uploading those old shows, so he's getting followers. And then when he starts the vlog, the tips, and all that, it was
Well, and
very easy for him to grow.
that's an easy transition because that's not even fair. His dad did a TV show, he had a
Mm-hmm.
TV show, and moving from a TV show to a YouTube is just changing your platform. Let's just be real honest. Not every, like, a lot of these guys grew up. I mean, I don't want to call any anglers out, but we've seen enough weigh-ins. We've seen enough of these guys talk. Not all
Not
these guys.
everybody's cut out for it.
No, when we have a hobby or sport that you have a lot of guys they're not real polished. Let's just leave it at that.
There's nothing wrong with it. And some of those guys that aren't real polished are absolute hammers.
Oh, absolutely.
But
But it's gotten to a point where you got to have the 1-2 punch if you're going to make money in this deal. You have to be able to fish and you have to be able to walk the walk. And Wheeler's excellent at it. Scott Martin is excellent at it. Brandon Polinick's excellent at it. And those guys are making the most money. Swindle is excellent at it. Ike,
yeah,
like those guys, don't be fooled about. You don't just look at the winnings for the year and go, that guy's making the most. I mean, these guys like Swindle and Ike have contracts that you wouldn't believe.
yeah. Ike's got a really good TW deal. I can tell you that. And you know, he's a TW affiliate, and I was told at one time, this is a couple years ago, he was their #1 affiliate, even above Tactical Bassin, which blows my mind. I know what Tactical pulls in; it would blow you guys' mind. Like I'm over here getting like a $300 check every 3 months.
Well, I knew what it was brought up on a recent podcast I listened to. It was probably the most interesting one I've heard in the last 2 months, as far as some of his comments, and that was Skeet and how much he made with the old Wright and
Skeet
McGill
had a
deal.
hell of a Lucky Craft deal. I mean, it was unreal. I want to think a $500,000 deal.
He had a 5-year run where that dude, he probably made $5 to $8 million in a 5-year span, if I was guessing. Maybe more. I mean, I don't know. I think it's like anything. I think that if people knew how the average angler, like, let me word it differently. I think people would be very surprised at how little the bottom 70 were making. I think they'd be very surprised at what the top 5 to 8 are making. There are 5 to 8 guys that are clearing $1 million.
Out of how many anglers in the United States?
Well, I know, but I think people are so convinced at this point they're all broke. Some people are just convinced that everyone out there trying to fish is broke, and that's not true. But 70% of them are probably not exactly thriving. But
yeah, I want to pull up their Credit Karma, to be honest with you.
You have a top 10%. I mean, I heard 10 years ago what some of Ishman Rose deals were, and some of these guys that have been around a long time and have been staples in this industry, and they were making big time money. I mean,
so what's changed to why these guys aren't making money? You would think with more, social media is big, YouTube, there's more coverage. Is it too much coverage that one or 10 people can't stand out? I see the pros blame guys like me. Say, well, you got Baitman. He's got a podcast over here. I can't get no deals because these YouTubers, influencers are getting all the money.
Well,
I mean,
I think there's a little bit of truth to that because I think that Guggens broke the mold, man.
yeah,
I really think that they I mean, I'm not saying they were the originals, but they were the basically they're like, hey, look, there's 5 of us. Let's band together and create an unstoppable force. And I mean, I think we're maybe seeing it wasn't long term sustainable, but for a 5-year period, like anything else, a 5-year bell curve, those guys crushed it.
yeah. I'm not
And
going to hate on them for you know what
it
they did
was,
as far as changing the media and sponsorship deal. I mean, I might not have the deal I've got without them. Kind of changing the curve there, but I could see instead of people spending $100,000 with one angler, they spend 50, and they can give guys like me that's got a full time job and say, "Hey, we'll give you $600 a month for a year," and you go, "I'm already making 80,000 a year. I'll use that money for fishing money." That's cool.
I
Um,
just think that it all stems back to what we discussed, where it's you have a finite number of anglers and you have content just excess and
mhm.
how you create value is getting so much harder. I mean, Zona has arguably one of the coolest fishing shows out there. I haven't seen an episode in 5 years.
Yeah, only one I watched was him on Lake X, and I watched the him and Van Dam, the Zona Live replay all the time on YouTube, where they crushed him up north. I'm always looking to try to do something different nobody else is doing. That's why I started the Whatnot thing. Not that anybody sponsors paying me, but I can go get rid of baits and make an extra dollar or two. That's how I help buy this boat. I'm always looking to do the next thing. Uh, I would love to be able to have my own sales rep like you come in and I can order what I want to sell on Whatnot. So here's a good question, and we'll totally get off the Bass Pro Tours and all
Oh,
that.
sure.
When this is more of a sales. It's so long. You have to be brick and mortar, brick and mortar. You got to have brick and mortar store. When are we going to acknowledge that brick and mortar is not where it's at all the time? You've got to have an online sales presence. And I think that's what's really hurt a lot of people. They've really been so got to have them in the store. But for running 2 online shops that both of them eclipsed over 250,000, almost 500,000 sales in 1 year, the bread and butter was being able to have the inventory, have the latest in what people are wanting, and ship it out in 24 hours. And I feel the industry's stubborn where, no, we can't just sell to you, Baitman, because you've got a website. You've got to go spend $1,500, $2,000 a month, rent a store, and you've got to pay overhead and electric bills and all that just so you can carry our product. I don't agree with that.
It's tough because that is a thing that comes up, right? And um, I think part of why a lot of these companies do that is because that's a way for them to help control MAP, which is minimum advertised price. Because if you sold to every person that said, hey, I got a Facebook store or I got a Shopify, you'd have so much product in the marketplace and guys would be selling 20, 30%. You couldn't ever reel it back in. And so that's why I personally believe that they do that. And it's because everybody, like none of the brands that I rep for will drop ship either, almost none of them. And none of them will sell to a store without a brick and mortar. It's very common because the brick and mortar essentially shows you're dedicated and you've bought into the business and
Right.
you're not going to all of a sudden be selling out of the trunk of your car or your attic. Like that's the concern. And like I said, then all of a sudden the tackle store at Kentucky Lake is like, well, Kevin Baxter down the street selling out the trunk of his car for 10% off. How do I compete with that? So
Right.
that's where, even if it's not true, that's what everyone starts screaming. And he was doing buy one, get one free and wheeling and dealing. And he was selling Shimano's for 25% off and Daiwa's for this. And what the heck, dude? The guy's selling out of his Corolla. So
Funny thing is, I've actually heard that before. Like, got
so
calls like, "Hey, what's this guy doing online? Why has he got so much business?" Check my map. Pricing's the same as your pricing.
But that's why they do it. It allows them to know where everything's shipped at and keeps it from being so widely distributed that they can't control their own map. And map's always a problem anyway.
So explain map to the viewer. So you get on, and this goes with bass boats too. As you see it on my bass boat page all the time. Someone posts a boat. You son of a bitch, why ain't you putting a price on there? That's false advertising. Actually, the reason they can't is because of map and MSRP, especially in bass boats. A lot of companies don't let you even put an advertised price for a 2014 model. In the fishing industry, Shimano, for example, they have very strict map policy. Explain that to guys that don't know.
So say a Corrado map is minimum advertised price. So say a Corrado is $199 map from Shimano. Once I buy that reel and it is in my retail store, I can't have a scrolling sign out in front of my store that says 20% off Shimano. I can't write on Facebook 20% off Shimano. Basically, I have to advertise that reel at $199. However, there are loops with map because I can advertise in my store whatever I want to sell it at. I just can't externally advertise it or put it on Facebook or anything like that. Now, that gets tricky because the whole idea is that you really try to sell it for, and I understand the manufacturer's point on all of this because you don't want to devalue the brand. Like if you have a retail partner, margins on reels are so bad anyway that I promise you nobody's selling them at 20% off because they wouldn't make any money. But even if you had a customer like constantly that you knew was always selling it at 10% off, you would probably decide that wasn't a retail partner that you necessarily wanted, because Shimano's will sell all day at full price. And that's generally map. It's really just because it does happen, kind of like where I talked about, where such and such has it down the street and they're selling it for this and they got it advertised for this, and this guy just came in and said he bought it down there for this price. Like that's just part of being a salesman in a territory where you have multiple different accounts. Like it is a little bit of drama infested, where everybody's so curious about what everybody else is doing and how much they're buying and what are they selling it for. And so that stuff does go on, but for the most part, there's not a tremendous amount of issues, but there are still a lot of companies that try to control minimum advertised price. And I don't blame them for doing it because it keeps that premium. You want your brand, when you're selling a $200 to $500 reel, you want
to sell it at full price because you want people to believe they got a $500 reel. You sell it at $250, they don't feel they've got that $500
yes
reel.
Yes, you want everyone to feel like that's a premium brand. They're always full price. I can't go anywhere else and find it cheaper. Like that brand does not need to be discounted in order to sell.
Here's a great question. It's not really a question, it's a statement. Darius says you can get the reels cheaper in Japan, which is true. Why is it that we can buy the JDM version Shimano cheaper from Japan than we can the U.S. version? Is it because of the cost of importing them over here?
I've heard that recently, where there's dealers that are essentially getting JDM product and it's not coming from the U.S. sales side of business. And I will be 100% transparent. I don't have the resources in my brain to even answer that question, to why that's happening. It should not be happening. I mean,
I thought that when I sold was in the tackle. Says I have guys that email me or Facebook, hey, what's your price on Metaniums? And I say here on the website. And usually I'm trying to gauge how interested this guy. So sometimes if a guy said, if I bought 4, what would you do? That was kind of how I avoided map. The way I was always told,
sure,
they can't control your phone conversation, your email, or your text. they can't get into your register, but they can tell you, hey, you gotta take that sign down. You can't do that. You can't post this on Facebook. But then I would see guys, say, well, I can get them in Japan and show me the price, free shipping. I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. I can't. Like, that's my cost. I can't sell you that.
Yeah, I don't know why. I really don't know why they're. Now here's the deal, right? If you order directly from Japan, JDM, like it might be a month before you get it.
It's getting better. I ordered some stuff not long ago. It was 3 days. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable.
From DHL.
I would have thought legitimately 3 weeks to a month to get it from Japan.
Now that was just some dice baits, but I don't know about ordering reels.
Yeah, no, I don't either.
Well, you also got more JDM shops, like Lee's Bait and Tackle around Chicago. You got Hookup Tackle. It's got a lot of JDM stuff. And I'm sure maybe there's more of that stuff coming over here, that it's not just one port in California that's getting the JDM stuff.
I'd be curious if that market's still as big as it is. I mean, is it still as sought after as it used to be? I mean, I know Depths is huge and some other brands, but I will be honest, I used to be like really, really into the JDM stuff, and I'm not as much anymore. So I'd be curious to know what.
We're going to Ashley. Just put my lashes on me.
I go through phases, So let's see. I'm trying to think of anything else we need to talk about here. I saw a question on here and then I missed it. Okay, Brian did say most big companies will cut you off if you get caught. And they have dedicated employees monitoring.
Oh gosh, they have scrubbers. Like they have third-party Amazon. Like if somebody gets on there and is selling below map on Amazon or eBay, like a lot of these manufacturers have these Amazon scrubbers to where it'll pop up every day where it's like, hey, this Amazon account is selling below map, and then you can, obviously you can link it to find out which retailer that is that you sold it to, and yes, you can cut them off.
I got busted by Lose one time.
There's usually 3 warnings.
Yeah, one time I mispriced a reel. Like, you got to type all this stuff in manually, and I forgot the one I was selling. Loose Tournament Pros was advertised for like $149, and they called me like, "Hey, you got to take this." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I don't break map." And they sent me a screenshot. I'm like, "Oh gosh, that was a typo." Okay, no problem.
There are a lot of these companies that are very, very strict gun manufacturers. Holy cow! Like, very adamant that you sell within their map window.
So, where do you see the future of sales right now in the industry? Where there's baits, rods, reels, is the spinning reels, rods, is it just crushing it now, or people actually they bought enough spinning rod and reels that they're back to they just need them for minnow baits and drop shot, and that's about it?
I'm not currently concerned about this industry, but I think the next 3 years will be very telling. Because if the technique window has really gotten so small to where you only need 4 to 6 combos, that's going to really dictate what gets sold long term.
I feel that really hurts the company like Dobbins, and I love Dobbins rods. Don't get me wrong, but they've built their following on technique specific models where they've got
but they still rule. They still dominate, like in the big swim bait stuff.
Yeah, they do.
A lot of people love their rods for glides and big swim baits and A-rigs and stuff like that. That stuff's always going to have a place. Those guys aren't going anywhere that like to throw those big swim baits. I've seen enough of those pages, and that's what they do. But the tournament driven baits, like I said, I think the window's too small. I think this year was going to be a decline anyway, and I think a lot of companies are down 10 to 20%. But even if forward-facing sonar didn't exist, I think they'd be down 10 to 20%.
I mean, a gallon of milk's $6.
I mean, so. I can tell you right now, the way I shop for tackle has zero to do with forward-facing sonar, and I'm spending less on tackle.
Yeah, I've actually, you probably don't watch my channel all the time. That's fine. But the viewers can tell you I haven't done a tackle warehouse unboxing all year. I was buying last year before. I do 2 or 3 a year, maybe more than that. I'd spend 100, $150. Not a problem. Now I take my extra money, and of course I've been saving it for my own uh, reasons, and I feed the kids, and people are tight with their money. So I really, my point is, jig head minnows aren't going to kill the fishing industry. Now,
No, but the one thing I will say, the only thing I will say about the live scope and the jig head minnow and etc. is literally that is all anybody put out at ICAST.
I know it's bad, except for Strike King. Strike King did put out a flat side crankbait.
Yeah, I mean there were a couple top, but I mean literally it was the most uninterested I've been at ICAST personally, because that's literally all anybody had, and it was hey, this is my new jig head, and my line tie is behind the head, so it oscillates better, and it's tungsten, so you can see it better on forward face. Like, you can't have a conversation without forward facing being front and center, and that is, I mean, you talk about people, all the conversations at Bass with sponsors, etc. Like that's all anybody's talked about. And I still think, I know that this year was done. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
We got a comment here from Christopher. He may have just tuned in. I think he might have touched earlier, but good time to re-chime. How big are tournament selling baits compared to the rest of the bass fishing world?
It's tough to put a number on it, because I know I was in the industry at the time barely, and I guess the one I equate it to is Kevin Van Dam. We went back to back in classics. 2010 Lay Lake, one on a red eye shad, and a little balsa flat side. Went nuts. And I know that the Chartreuse and Black 1.5 that he won on in Catawachi, they sold like
special
20,000 units in the first weekend. I mean, I don't know. I don't think tournament winning baits are the same anymore, because I'm bringing up 12-year-old tournaments.
You remember when Skeet went on a bass tricks at Guntersville? You couldn't find one of them things in the United States for a week. It was unreal. Bruce over at Bass Tricks said he was pouring. He had to hire people. He was pouring somebody, and then what happened? The quality went down. He was trying to keep up with demand.
I think that it used to. I still think it dominates. I guess I can answer his question. I don't know a percentage at all. I think it used to be very, very important. But like I said, I'm referring to 12 to 14-year-old tournaments. I think it's less important today, but part of that is because of what I discussed earlier. It's just there's too much content. I don't think people know how every tournament's won. And then I also think that I don't know, I lost my thought, but I think that it's just the fishing world it's just changed. It's streaming dominated now. There's too much content, and you don't just like, no one gets a physical Bassmaster copy and they're like, oh cool, Justin Hammer won on a Mega Bass or Yo Zero or whatever he was throwing. Like it's just, the stuff is everywhere. Content's everywhere. Everybody consumes via Facebook and Instagram. I mean, if anyone's like me, sometimes you scroll, you see something, you're kind of reading it, and then you move on to an email and you go back into your app, and then what you were reading disappears and you can never find it again. So
I hate that. I started learning to use the bookmark function.
So that's, I don't know. I just think that the one thing I will say is tournament fishing still drives the innovation. And that's kind of what national tournaments still drive bait innovation. And the fact that everybody had a minnow and a jig head at ICAST proves that.
Yeah. I think what happens is something I was been talking to other guys with, and this relates to sales too, is if you got a company that's just, let's say all you do is make balsa crankbaits. I feel what's happening now with the live scope and stuff, that's hurting you way more than it's hurting a company like 6 Sense, Strike King, or Berkeley that has that ability to produce a lot of different stuff. And let's be honest, most guys are going to throw a balsa crankbait in the spring. So you've got this window from February to April to sell your baits, and after that, you got to pray someone like Takahiro Omori comes out and wins a late summer tournament. At that time, that's when the Classic was, which was great for Bagley and whoever made balsa then when he won the Classic on a B2 square bill. But if you don't sell your specialized bait in that certain window, then you're hurting. And now it's even more hurting, I think.
Yeah, I don't think that the big trendy companies are having an issue right now. I mean, everybody's crying a little bit because business is soft. But if you're a company that's been on the up and up, you just pivoted. Like, okay, I'm not selling 10-foot diving crankbaits, but I have a new jig head and I have a new minnow, and like my dollars are now being spent over here. Because once you build a brand so big, as long as you continue to build newness, like everybody buys into newness. The retailers, like they put it on the shelves and people buy what's new, like almost always. So
yeah, I don't think it's nothing new we're seeing with the forward-facing minnow and jig head. Look at the chatterbait. Chatterbait blew up. How many companies had a chatterbait? It didn't take a year. Everybody had one. Now, Z-Man, people hate on them for enforcing their patent. I'm not going to lie. I think that's a great move. They tried to protect
they better
bait.
they better get paid on everything they can with that. If you can get the patent, you better get every dollar you can. And the chatterbait's been impressive how long that stayed where it has. I compare it until, like, if this is a 3-year trend, I think the conversation's different. But the A-rig was similar because everybody then had a boot tail and a jig head.
Yep.
And then they had a kitchen whisk or an A-rig. And then it was how many blades? You like 4 blades, 6 blades, 8 blades, 8 wires, 6 wires. And the other one that was a thing that no one even realizes it at this point, but it was a thing for an iCast, was the Ned. Everybody took their best-selling flipping bait, and they're like, cool, let's make it 1.5 inches.
Yeah. I was thinking about that the other day. So I was trying to think of stuff like from the past, especially in sales. What's driven sales just like this forward-facing craze? And I'm going back and said, you know what? No one said it, but the Ned rig craze, everybody did it. Everybody, we got to have a downsized worm. We've got to have a tiny 16th ounce jig head. And it flooded tackle shops, and guys are buying. You don't hear as much Ned rig talk as you did 2-3 years ago.
I don't think it's being used, and I don't think it's being sold. Not like it was. It was a thing for about 18 months, and I don't see anything that makes me think they're going to stop biting a minnow in these certain lakes. But I mean, fish have surprised me before, and techniques have surprised me, and maybe we do move on to something else. But I do believe the techniques are limited, and I do think it's being it's not being talked about enough in the aspect of, if I'm fishing in 20 foot of water and I see that in 40 foot in front of my boat there's a brush pile that stands 8 foot tall, I'm not throwing a 20-foot diver and crashing into it and losing my bait. I'll throw a 10-foot diver and go 1.5 feet over that brush pile, and I won't lose my bait. So, like, there is no doubt people are losing less tackle because of forward-facing sonar.
Yeah,
and honestly,
I've lost so many 6XDs and 6 Sense Cloud 15s just because there was no forward-facing. That brush pile. I don't know how tall it is. I'm just banging
exactly. It in there. You want people to lose their baits. Let's be honest. Like Yamamoto.
I was going to Gary's the perfect formula. It catches a bass and it lasts for one bass.
You may not even get a bite, but it's the best. That's the best slim worm tail bait exists, or whatever shape we want to necessarily call that. It's a Cinco shape.
Stick worm, whatever.
Yeah, stick worm. Nobody has duplicated it. It's the best one, period. And yeah, he's made a living off of people spending $1 a worm and getting one bite. Not a bass, one bite.
Now, Brian says the price difference is a concern. Dealers are not selling higher ticket items, creating cash flow. $2 minnow versus $15 hard bait. Most run on cash flow during tough times rather than profit. You agree or disagree?
Oh, I agree with the fact that in general, it's you're selling cheaper baits. And and less, and it's harder to sell them. And I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that you want people throwing deep crankbaits and you want people losing them. Like, I just don't think that this has been mentioned enough as far as trying to sell tackle.
Right. I agree. You're the first person to really bring that up. It's something I thought about and was talking to somebody, and they said, well, here's the deal with the minnows. Guys don't lose that many. You don't go through them. If you're fishing open water and you glue one together, it lasts forever.
Yeah, and you're not getting hung up on anything other than a bass's face. Like you're not. What are you going to get hung up in 30 foot of open water?
So MJ says, is the jig head minnow the new Cinco of deep water? Just a staple that never quits working. That's the question I think everybody's wondering. How long is this a fad? Is it only because of forward facing? But I saw where Jacob Wheeler said, I've refined the technique now, where even if I don't have low live sonar, if I'm using my side imaging and down scan, I can still target those same fish with this technique. I just won't be able to see them bite it live.
I think a lot of guys probably won't have confidence fishing it that way, but I have no doubt it would work that way. And I mean, look, at the end of the day, what I've learned is fishermen have a really short memory. If all of a sudden they start catching them on different stuff next year, the sale trends will follow. The sales trends still follow professional fishing. I mean, period.
Yeah.
Period. I mean,
yeah. So a lot of people, like us going back to Strike King, they put the hard liner out. So that bait is designed after a Sony Reynolds Little Petey flat side crankbait. It's an ABS version. And people are like, oh, that's silly for them to release that. Flat sides are dead. And I said, yeah, but all it takes is for one guy in a tournament, elite MLF, to actually catch them on it and make a top 3, top 5. They'll sell so many. And then it makes flat sides cool again.
Well, the other argument is Skeet won this year on a square bill, but do enough people know that?
No. I think most people forgot about it.
Well, and that's the other argument is how many people – look, I know that evidently BPT has a big following. All I'll say is a lot of the diehard fishermen I know don't follow it very closely.
Do you think the tournament organizations are lying about their viewers?
How many viewers you got right now live, Kevin? Multiply
99. 99.
So there's
99 on YouTube, and I'll probably say 10 or 15 on Facebook.
So you could say 1,000, and nobody could prove you otherwise.
Well, other than the fact that it actually says
but,
in the top.
But my whole point is these companies are privately held. They can tell you whatever they want. I mean, every subsequent Bassmaster Classic's the highest attended.
Yeah, I noticed that. Now, I ain't gonna lie, that one in Knoxville a few years ago where Ott won.
I mean,
but you're talking about East Tennessee is like the mecca of one of the meccas of bass fishing and springtime fishing, square bills, crankbaits, balsa baits. It's unreal. But I go to the East Tennessee show this year. It was one of the lowest attended ones in a while. I don't know why.
I do actually believe some of what they put out, but I think some of it's for show, right? Like no one's going to put out there, hey guys, we were down 22% in viewership this week. So I take it at a grain, I take it for what it is. But there's nothing to debunk it. How about that?
Yeah. And I don't want anybody mad, and they can, say what they want. So I like the NPFL. I like what they're doing. Hella Bass made a really good point last year. The distribution of how you view the NPFL is tough. You've got to go on to this website, Fishix or whatever it's called. When they first started, they were streaming to Facebook and YouTube. I don't mean this negative. I got 100 viewers now. That's more than any video I saw of live coverage of an NPFL event, because it was saying in the top left how many people were viewing. And I'm thinking, this isn't good. Those numbers need to be 500, 600, 1,000 people for this thing to sustain. And then all of a sudden you couldn't see that anymore. You had to go on their website, watch the video. Now you don't know the numbers.
I still think, and I need to come out and apologize to NPFL tonight while I have the ability to do so. What happened?
No, I'm just saying, there's an apology.
Well, I don't do those much, but I
Never apologize.
I have been one, they came out their first year and basically said, we're doing a championship. Ha, no, we're not. We don't have the money to do one. And then they had an issue their second year, I believe, where a guy won the tournament. They gave him the trophy. Then he had a polygraph and they found out he didn't have a fishing license. They took his trophy away. They took all the results off the website and they're like, oh yeah, never mind. This guy won. And they took photos at like 10 at night of Ryan Satterfield, who then won the tournament. And I'm not saying that, I'm just saying they should have had that cleaned up before they give the guy a trophy, that he didn't have a fishing license. But I said that was my apology, and I don't want to go into any more details other than that. Like I said, I've criticized them. I think some of it's warranted, but I am going to go out there and say that they were the biggest winner last week. Period. They got out in front of everybody else, made a hard stance on it.
Yep. Yeah, I'll give credit where credit's due. There's no issue for me. Look, Brandon, I was critical of them too. I mean, they're a brand new league. They're trying to break into the same market as Bass and MLF. Both brands well established with well established anglers. And I think my biggest knock the first couple of years, well, who you got fishing? I mean,
sure,
it was really top heavy. And, one of my good friends is Brandon Perkins, and I like Taylor Watkins. They both won 3, or Taylor's won 2. Perkins has won 3 NPFL events. So I was like, well, there's not a whole lot of variety over here. Now you got Patrick Walters, John Cox. You're starting to see some other names rise up. And so, yes, I was a little critical of them, but I again, I might love forward-facing sonar, but they come out real black and white and said, hey, we're going to ban it. We're going to try something different. We're going to step outside the box. And you know what? It may work great for them. It may not work, but at least they tried. They're not dumb. They see all the people that are anti-forward facing on social media and tired of watching this. Hey, what if Bass's numbers are really 50,000 people watching live? And they say, what if we just get 10%? Now all of a sudden we've went from 200, 300 people watching to 2,500 people watching our stuff. That's a win for them.
Sure, and I'm not even saying that they were a winner because of their decision, but they were the first to do it, and to me that was a big deal. And for 2.5 days, all anyone talked about was NPFL. Who's NPFL? What's NPFL? Brad went on a handful of podcasts and basically said, yeah, this is why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and I don't regret it. Period. This is it. If you don't want to fish, thank you for your time. We're going to have a turnover regardless, and somebody's going to take your spot. And that's kind of what Bassmasters always live by. 70 of the elites want to leave and start their own league. That's fine. Someone else can take your spot. And it happened, 5 years ago when this whole deal split off. I think everybody kind of thought that the winner would be the side that took most of the talent, but we reconvened 5 years later. I don't know that that's really the winner. So,
Bass will always have the classic.
I just thought it looked really good that they did it first, and then 2 days later you had the other two the bigger leagues come out and kind of make their decision. It looked good on NPFL going, yeah, we're going to go ahead and let this horse out of the bag.
Yeah, I like Brad Fuller too. By the way, every conversation I've had with him has always been professional. I did a little article on Omega for him back in the day, and when he owned Omega, it was top shelf stuff, and now Taylor Watkins own it. Still good company.
Question, random question. Oh, sure. Go ahead. Go ahead before you finish. But I have a question.
I was going to say, I've seen the comments. I mean, I'm a Bass guy. FLW's in my hometown, though, so I love the FLW guys that work there, but I thought it was Bush League to put out what they did about the forward-facing sonar. Or, no, not forward-facing, the no information. They put it out. Yes, you can go get information till January 1st. And then 2 days later, by the way, we're going to change that. Why was that even a discussion in the first place? Like, you've had all this. This is going to. I'm going Joe Rogan on you, okay? You've had all this controversy over people buying waypoints and this and that. Let's say that it's true. Let's say there's a group of 6 or 7 guys that were buying waypoints and cashing checks and money, and and there's evidence they did this. Now, guess what you've got into? Now you've got violated the RICO Act, and the RICO Act is a federal offense. Do you really want your eyes all over, your organization for allowing this to happen? And so when I was like, I can't believe they're doing this. Now
I
they
have
come back.
no clue how they missed that, and no clue. I mean, that was. I mean, I guess it just proves to you if the internet melts down enough that anybody's willing to possibly change their mind, because you can't convince me otherwise than that wasn't retroactively reverted back to no info, other than the fact that all the anglers basically made a post talking about how opposed of it they were.
And then you got MLF it's so confusing that they banned it for high school, college guys, but it's okay for the BFL guys.
No. You already got it wrong.
It's
banned in banned in high school, okay in college. BFL and Toyota, no changes, so you can use it as you always have. The tackle warehouse, you use it on the first day, cannot use it on the second day, can use it on the third day. So basically, you can use it on day 1. So everybody fishes day 1 and day 2, right? And then the third day, that's if you make it the top 30 or whatever it is, you get to use it again. That one, I think they flubbed personally. That's the most confusing one. I would have rather them say just every other event they can use it, or no changes. And then the BPT I actually kind of like. I'll be honest. You
declare when you're going to use it.
You can use it one period, and you have to declare, and the other anglers can see. So I guess it'll be like Jacob Wheeler has caught another bass. Jacob Wheeler is using live scope.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I'm not. So.
I mean, I don't know, man. I just think it's very interesting that I guess finally it's made it harder, because like a great point a couple people have mentioned. I guess it's similar to Canadian football and US football and everything else, but how do you even explain the fact that there's 3 professional circuits and they all fish for the same fish, but they all do totally different things?
There's no unified sets of rules.
No. I mean, one, you just catch as many as you want. One, you catch 5. One, you can't use live scope. BPT considers 360 forward facing. NPFL does not consider 360 forward facing. So and then you got all the screen regulation now too. But it's too much.
Well, now that all the tours are pretty much done, I think NPFL may have an event left. Yeah. Or
they
2.
Do. 1 or 2.
We're actually, kind of going to get into the silly season here. So this is why I'll have different guests and different crazy topics here on Baitman Live, and probably get Cap and Ron back on here, my buddy Epic Eric and stuff. And Brandon, I'm going to wind it down. I see you looking back. I think your wife is going, what are you talking about?
I got my 2-year-old banging I'm on my back porch, and she's banging on the glass.
I know how that is. So I'm gonna wind it down here. I'm gonna make some comments on some things. I'm gonna go ahead and let you go, dude. Anytime you would come on and talk bass and baits and whatever else, we never got to talk about it, but one thing you guys don't realize, Brandon used to be a rep for Bandit crankbaits.
I did. Yeah, before our time with 6 Cents, and I literally just this past week was clearing out the garage and had some sample rings and some old Bandit 200 and 300s new in package, and got rid of all of them pretty quick. I was actually impressed at the following that's out there for them.
Yeah,
so I had a good time selling them.
I sell a lot of Bandits on Whatnot. I've got a stash of them. I'll ask you here, what's the difference between the old school Bandits and the Pratco
You
Bandits?
probably know. I need to phone a friend. I have a buddy that can tell you probably all about that. But honestly, when I because it's been 8 or 9 years. So it was only like a year that I actually was selling them. And yeah, you start talking about the difference in it's like anything else. Who knows what the true difference is? I think a lot of it's in people's heads, but it was, yeah, like Japan and then Guatemala or China, and everybody was on the outs going, it's the same, it's not the same, but it's no different than the Vixen and all this other stuff that we've walked through. And can I really tell you what the true difference in manufacturing is?
I think people get it in their heads, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you're confident in something, you're confident in it. I mean, I like the OG Vixen, but I like that Teckle too.
I only throw that Teckle one now. I have probably a dozen OG Vixens, and the Teckle's one.
There you go, guys. If you want OG Vixen, get on his Instagram and get in his DMs. He's selling stuff.
That's funny.
But yeah, I thought that was cool when I seen that you had the dealer ring and all that stuff. And to be honest, I can't ever remember a true Bandit rep until they were bought by Pradco. And then, I had a Pradco rep. They're pretty, as popular as they were, they're still a small company.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's a lot different now that they've been bought out. Oh, gosh.
Uh-oh. Well, Brandon, I'll tell you what, I'm going to let you go. Get off here. Go hang out with the little girl. We really appreciate you being on here, giving you some insight and your opinions. I respect you, call you a friend, and I get out that way. Texas, we'll have to go fishing.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
No problem. All right, guys. Thanks for Brandon Dickerson for joining in tonight. I know how it feels to have a little girl that's trying to beat your door down and come see daddy. But I figured I'd talk to you guys one-on-one for just a few minutes. I will announce some news, and you will see a video soon. I am going to pick up a bass boat. And I'm going to let you guys know I really, really appreciate every viewer, every co-streamer, Epic Eric, Brandon, Captain Ron, Ben Milliken, the list goes on that's ever did a stream with me. I appreciate every channel member in here. You don't have to be a member for a year, a month, 2 months. That $5 has gone a long way. It's helped me buy some baits to show on here, but I actually put all that money in a savings account, believe it or not. Anybody that's ever watched a YouTube video, and I set a goal years ago that I was going to buy a boat before I turned 40. I'll be 39 in November, and scheduled to go get it Friday morning. I got to drive up to Michigan. I bought a Triton. It's a 2014 or something. I can't remember, 2014 or 2012. It's got a 2017 hull on it, 2018 Pro XS Merc, 2 power poles, 3 HDS 12s, lithium batteries. The only problem is it's silver with blue. And I don't want y'all to think all of a sudden that I became a UK fan. But that was the best deal. And guys like, thank you, Bushrat. Darius, my friend from over across the Cadiz, always been supportive of the channels, took me fishing, and just a great guy. And, like I said, it's not about getting donations of $2,500, $100. I enjoy getting on here. I'm sorry I don't make as much content, but I'm excited about the new rig. I'll be able to make more videos because we're going to do some bait videos from the bass boat instead of the bait room. We'll actually put some fishing videos. I truly believe if you work hard, good things happen. If you want something bad enough, work for it. And I have worked countless amounts of overtime. I have sold tons of baits that I thought I was just going to do a couple of whatnot streams and for fun, and it's turned into a side business. And so anyone that's bought anything off whatnot, that's where all my little profits gone is to help with the boat. And I really appreciate it. And, guys have sent me tackle, like Caleb, I know he sent me some Jackal bow sticks and some spinner baits. And that stuff, I'm not going to resell. I like to keep it to myself. And this fishing community, for as many podcasts are on here, as many Instagram posts where we like to rag the industry and all that. This industry wouldn't be what it was if it wasn't for the community, and that community of fishing anglers and tackle junkies, tackle freaks, people that just enjoy bass fishing. It wouldn't be what it is. So I just want you guys to know I really appreciate every one of you. It doesn't matter If you watch one video a month or you watch everything I put up here, I really appreciate it. And so when I start doing more videos within the next month or so, couple weeks, I'll be making sure I highlight all my channel members at the end of the video because I want people to know the guys that support. And I got to do a giveaway for 2 weeks ago. I got to get that done. But anyway, I'll do a little blog, post it up next week. It's going to be a long drive. I got to drive 8 hours to Lansing, Michigan. I got to try to make it back before my son's football game Saturday morning. So, but yeah, absolutely. My name is not going to be Minnow Man, Eric, and I'm glad. So next spring, I'm going to get good at. I got to relearn the leg, and so that's what's crazy. Is everything's changed, and I'm actually looking forward to making some video content and me trying to go back on Kentucky Lake and relearn it. It's going to be totally different, but trust me, I'll be having some flat side crankbaits this fall and spring, some balsa tied on, and then big top waters. Dude, it is like Lost Lake, but maybe I can get the one Obi-Wan Kenobi Eric. Get Epic Eric to fly in, come fish with me for a couple days. I don't know what we'll catch. Hopefully it's brown. Hopefully it's got on treble hooks. But I guarantee you we could have a blast. And, I may do a little subscriber giveaway. Well, maybe take a subscriber fishing or whatnot. So really excited about that. And, not being bored all the time. But thank you guys. And, I feel like there's a lot of streamers out there that are great, and I just want to make it known I really appreciate all the viewers and everything. I'm not just here to get clicks. I don't make a whole lot of money off YouTube. I'm telling you, it's just a couple $100 a month on a good month. I make more on a whatnot stream. Sometimes I don't make that much. So, can you do a stream with Epic Eric on river fishing baits techniques? I don't know. Ask Eric. I'm on midnights now, so I really need a good stream night. Do you guys like Wednesday night? I don't want to take Hellabass's spot. I don't like to stream after straight casts. But if Wednesday night is the best for you guys, let me know. And I also streaming this on Facebook Live as well now. So, but we may do more than one stream a week, especially once it starts getting dark earlier. So, all right, Eric says he's all in. We'll schedule it up. Let's talk some river. We'll do some river baiting. Eric, if you can do next week, same time, same place, I'm good with it, or I'll text you. You bring the baits. I'll bring what I know from the river. That's something I'm excited about, is going to fish the actual Cumberland and Tennessee River. Because a lot of people I fish with, they don't fish the rivers. I will definitely like to learn and be a little river radish down here. So, but guys, I'm going to go get myself a shower, do a little editing on the YouTube description and whatnot. And I got to go to work for about 8 hours. And you guys have a wonderful evening. The best way to support me, you can use my Tackle Warehouse link. It's usually in the description. Shop at 6 Cents Fishing. Use my discount Baitman. Gets you 10% off. Or at Waterland Sunglasses. Gets you 15% off. So, guys, y'all have a wonderful evening. And remember, it is September 11th. We could not do what we're doing, whether it's streaming on YouTube, flipping a jig in a brush pile, driving your bass boat at 90 mile an hour, or have the opinions we have if it wasn't for our great country, the United States. And September 11th, that was a game changer for me. We lost a lot of heroes, firefighters, police officers, and everyday people just like you and I that just wanted to go to work. So let's never forget that. You guys have a wonderful evening.